Hello and welcome. We are welcoming everybody in here. Oh, our slides are sliding forward for us. So good thing that they're working. Welcome everybody as you start jumping in. Hopefully you can hear us okay. Good afternoon and welcome to today's digital event, Hiring for Fit, the balance between skill and culture. To start us off today, I'm going to provide you with a few participation reminders as people start joining us. So that first one will be removing those distractions. Close down any of those unnecessary browser windows, silence your phone, or just put it on do not disturb. That is an option. Go ahead and use headphones if you're in the office so as not to provide distraction to anybody else, any of those sorts of things. We invite you to be active in the chat. So you can find the chat on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. If you'll give that a little test drive now, you can choose all panelists and attendees in the drop-down box, and then you can share what we call your digital business card. So your name, your email, your company name, and your website should do it. Just know that as soon as you hit enter, that is going to send. So if you're trying to put more than one thing, hit shift and enter, and you'll be able to put all of your information together as once. Oh, I'm hearing that the chat is disabled. So let me double check that. See, that's why we have that going, right? Let me go ahead and check that chat really quickly if it'll come up for me. Here's the chat. How about now? See, this is why we do these tests on here to make sure everybody can see and hear us. So now try and put your information in the chat there and make sure that that can work for you. We do encourage you to post your questions as they arise. So you can use the Q&A as one of our attendees just did to let me know what was going on. And we know that we have several topics to discuss, and we're sure that they're going to get those juices flowing for more items to discuss. So you can use either of those places to bring up any topics that you would like to discuss with us. So finally, there will be a recorded replay. And once that is finished processing, we are going to deliver that to you in the email address you registered with. So that will come to you as a YouTube link that you can share with others or that you can utilize to rewatch should you miss anything happening today. So the next thing that I get to do is to introduce you to your speakers. So I am your host for the day. I am Meg Kerns. I am Boost's Director of Marketing, and my team provides branding, marketing strategy, content, and support specifically to and for government contractors. My colleague today is Caitlin Ruiz, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. So Caitlin, welcome back. And who are you and what do you do for Boost?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here today, to be speaking with you, to be talking on this topic. I am the Director of Recruiting for Boost. And what my division does is we provide recruiting support for government contractors, both big, small, and super large. We're surge support. We're also your corporate on-demand team. We are here to help you grow your business and help you thrive in a realistic and sustainable way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caitlin. So in today's discussion, we are going to go over several of these topics here: recruiting versus staffing, preparation for job search, referrals, employer branding, as well as going over a little bit of a case study that we have recently completed. So I get to first stop the share so you can see the two of us as we are chatting directly with you today. And I get to ask my very first question to Caitlin, which is, how does Boost approach talent acquisition and recruiting, and how does that differ from a typical staffing agency?
Love the question, because it's a huge difference how Boost tends to both approach and even think about talent acquisition and recruiting. So in terms of how we can partner with smaller businesses and even mediums and larges, what we're bringing to the table that is different from a staffing firm is really a bespoke type of partnership. So it is unique. It is tailored specifically to that business. It's tailored specifically to that search. For example, or not in conjunction, but in comparison with a staffing firm, my experience has been that is typically not unique to either the business or the search, meaning that they have a plethora of candidates or a plethora of resumes, quite frankly, that they are pulling from, and most cases selling at the highest price. So they are working off of a percentage, a fee model for their hires. And so, for example, if we're talking about a 100K person and it's a 20% fee, then that's 20K. And so they are not necessarily tailoring a search specific to you, to your brand, to your process. It's not very much a partnership as much as it is just kind of like McDonald's drive-through feel, if you will. We are very interested in sitting down and talking to you about what's important to you, what has and hasn't worked, tailoring a process that supports that is collective and in true partnership with you. So honestly, Boost does require the clients to be interested in a real partnership, which does, of course, involve their time and their effort. But we find it is far more successful, far more sustainable, and retention rates are a lot higher because it is very much for you, of you, and with you. Whereas the staffing agency is just kind of sending you a cadre of resumes that, again, they probably sent 3 or 4 other organizations in a very similar search and just seeing kind of who bites. It doesn't feel very, specific. It feels very big. And we always joke that like staffing is a dirty word because we're just very much, it's a very different feeling. It's just not a partnership. It's just like going to an ATM. Like I'm not interested. We're far more interested in truly helping and being of real service.
And there are times and places to use both avenues of recruiting, correct? So when should someone reach out to engage a staffing agency rather than engaging somebody like Boost?
Yes, I mean, absolutely true. So there are certainly situations, contexts, even organizations that would greatly benefit from partnering or not partnering, but from using a staffing agency versus more of that kind of corporate on-demand extension of your own internal recruiting function. So some of those situations could be things as temp to perm, right? So if you're in a situation where you just need someone for 3 months, it's a maternity leave situation. It's a very specific amount of time, and the need won't go past that. Then you are better off with a place like a staffing agency who does tend to do the temp to perm model. We at Boost do not. It's just direct hire. We're not, again, we're not kind of selling people or humans, and it's not that feel at all. So if you are in a world in which that is what you're looking for, and you are looking for temporary help for a specific period of time, absolutely a staffing firm is your better bet. Also specific types of jobs that may be better geared towards a larger quantity of people. If we're talking about 50 of something, if we're talking about administrative assistants, if we're talking about that version of recruiting that is a little bit more on your transactional level and less on your strategic, longer term branding type of level, then absolutely a staffing agency is where you would want to go. So there's certainly, while we joke it's a dirty word, there are absolutely contexts and places for them that they thrive, that they would be better suited. And we will tell our clients, hey, we would love to take that kind of work on. It's just like, for example, that we don't do the temp to perm. So, but we would love to offer you an introduction to whomever, Aerotech is just the first one that comes to mind, and we'll kind of shepherd that relationship that way. So Boost is super honest in all of our divisions about what we do well and what we don't. And so sometimes there are searches that are better tailored for staffing agencies. But if you're looking for a full-time person, if you're looking to grow a contract, if you're looking for any sort of real evolution of your employer branding in terms of how you're tailoring processes, strategies, we're definitely more your type.
That makes a lot of sense. And that takes us to more of that strategy question, which is there a difference when we are looking and performing searches for backfilling a role versus a new addition type of role? So trying to fill somebody who's leaving or who you need to backfill instead of somebody who is newly created.
Yes and no. So I think backfills, well, and again, another favorite saying of mine is everything, it depends, right? It's all contextual.
We don't like it depends. You know that. At Boost, we don't do it depends.
No gray area here, please. So depends meaning, I understand like on a contract, we serve GovCons. So primarily we are working with contracts. Contracts specify certain FTEs, certain levels, certain LCATs. And so there are just very transactional backfills in which it's not leading us to a larger conversation. However, on a corporate level, if there's a backfill, perhaps there's an opportunity for a larger conversation. And some of those larger conversations might be around, do you need to backfill that exactly as it was? Is there some sort of business evolution that has occurred or expansion that has occurred in which maybe we can see this role differently? Can we look to combine certain things and make more strategically driven decisions around staffing on a corporate level? And again, sometimes even on contracts, that is also an option. It just really depends how it was bid, if you're priming or subbing, and what your rates are, and if we can blend them, and how well you know your government customer, and if you can sell that. So it just kind of all depends, but there's definitely different versions of strategy that goes with that hand in hand. So if we are just transactionally backfilling, that's pretty clean. What is the LCAT? What is the job description? What was that person that has left? I always love to ask our clients, do we know why that person has vacated, so that we can use that information to better tailor going to market and trying to find someone, whether that be finding a better fit for that role or having the harder conversations around, hey, that person got here and that role wasn't at all what they thought it was supposed to be. Why is that? How could we have done better? Like, what did we not communicate? What did we not know about? Maybe that we didn't not communicate, but we truly didn't know existed. And then how can we also tailor process to either weed something out or bring something in terms of how we are looking at and evaluating candidates that come through the process. When we're looking at expansion, those are my personal favorite because there isn't necessarily like a previous mold that we're either having to talk about or, is kind of stifling creativity around it. When it's expansion, I also, though, often caution our clients to try to come out of a box because what will happen with expansion roles or new addition roles is they in their mind have already created a title in a very specific kind of box that this person will fit in and fill. And I often ask them to try to come up a little bit and separate out, take a 40,000 foot view and think, what are the actual business needs? And then try to define, maybe it's one person, maybe it's two, maybe it's half a person, maybe it's an intern, maybe it's outsourced. Like the options are endless if we can really just define what the business needs are and try to extricate that from, it's a VP of ops. Well, does it have to be a VP of ops? Why do we think it's a VP of ops, right? Maybe that's all this person has ever seen or known that does these specific, XYZ skills or whatever. But once we talk about it, it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe that's actually a program manager with a little bit of BD. Like maybe it's something different. So just being open and really kind of, again, looking at the business needs and then defining as opposed to the other way around, which I often find people, they tackle it the opposite way.
We end up going in with a preconceived notion. We did that just recently, especially with something that I was involved in, where we went in thinking we needed one thing, an intern, and it actually came out that we needed somebody in a little bit more defined of a role and something that had a little bit more experience. So having that conversation and working through that process with you was very helpful for what I was going through, because I thought I had an idea of what this person was going to look like. And it really wasn't that at all. And we needed
Yep.
to redefine what that looked like in order to find the best person, which luckily for us, you are very good at what you do. And we found that person. And we've done that several times. And I think
Yes.
we talked a little bit earlier about, finding and really adding the human piece into that, where we've spoken previously about, just putting butts in seats, and that's not something that we do. It's really finding the unicorn human and figuring out what the needs are for both the business and the culture that they fit into, as well as fitting the needs of the role and the skill set. So we can find a lot of people that fit skill sets, but fitting a culture, I think, has a little bit different of a feel.
Absolutely. It certainly does.
When we're looking for new hires, new candidates, should we ask our team and our network to refer candidates, or is that kind of a gray area of hiring your friends? We talked about that on a previous podcast episode, which some people who are on with us today might have heard, but we talked a little bit about not going directly to hire your friends first.
Yes, we did. So in the podcast, it was primarily about the small businesses and how they are trying to mitigate risk. And so they think by hiring their friends, it's a known entity. So there's less of a risk involved, which 9 times out of 10, you haven't worked with your friends before. So it's actually not mitigating risk. And also just in general, humans are humans and you will never mitigate humans. So there's that. But you can tailor process and strategy to try to get the best out of it that you can and be as cautious and as educated about it through the process as you can. But I will say that trying to tap into your network is always a great idea. Asking your colleagues, coworkers, up, down, left, right, those in your field that you know and trust, also great. I always go to referrals first. It is usually, I would say, lowest hanging fruit, but I think that has a negative connotation because it's quite different. It is a little bit more of a known entity, but hopefully, those that are asking for the referrals, so those in our example at Boost, right? All of us at Boost are in and of ourselves brand ambassadors for Boost. So the idea behind referral networking your way to a candidate is actually that you are an embodiment and an example of what you are asking for. So if we are so disconnected, or if your current workforce is not the type of person that you're looking for, then that would be actually doing you a disservice and not helpful. So it depends, as usual.
No, not it depends again. Not it depends again. But we do have a question that came in from one of our viewers right now. And it says, if you as a company have a multi-stage process for candidate screening, which would take several weeks, what is the best way to manage a timing pressure from a staffing firm that may be submitting a candidate to multiple companies?
So is the question, how do we handle the candidate coming through the corporate
I think it's
process?
I think it's a little bit about the juxtaposition of the process itself, where we are screening and making sure that this person is a quality candidate versus just throwing a bunch of, resumes at somebody. How do we kind of manage that pressure to hire fast but hire well?
Oh, that is like the
The age
question,
old
right?
question.
All the time, right? It's always so. It depends on how much pressure we're talking about, but I will literally sit down with someone one-on-one, wherever the pressure is coming from. And I think you also have to get clear about where the pressure is coming from and why. I think a lot of times we just assume impatience, but sometimes it's actual, especially if it's contract oriented, we're losing revenue for an open position. And so getting clear about where the pressure is coming from and why. But then once I've identified that, and I still need to have this conversation around, look, I understand. I completely get why you are feeling this pressure. Here would be my suggestions for us to maybe get ahead of it next time. I understand we're in this boat right now. And because we are here are the three things that every search has: skills, culture timeline, fit-ish, and money. So all three things equally important most of the time. And if you are trying to expedite one or turn one up or turn one down, they all have to give. It's a balancing effect. So if you want to shoot up the money, we might be able to bring down the timeline. If you can't give up anything on money and you can't give up on anything on skills, you need to let go of the timeline because the other two things are finite. Like what is your absolute mandatory requirement within this trifecta? And being really realistic with them about a timeline from the beginning of a search. So if I know, for example, that this is a highly cleared person with a ridiculous skill set in a hard area, like here in the DMV in the Northern Virginia area, I will tell them, we could have all the money in the world. This search is probably going to take 30 days of full-time effort. Let's talk about what are the risks involved with that and how we can mitigate some of these other things. Are we for sure going to be, at default on a contract? How can we tackle that? Right? Like having the harder, honest conversations around it and hopefully trying to mitigate other areas of that as best you can. I also find that, especially if this is a new client, we've not worked with them before, they may be apt to kind of judge like why I think that, right? Like, well, why do you think it's going to take 30 days, right? It's more of a challenge for them. And at that point, then I have to lean on data. It's just a data game. So there's zero emotion or ego involved in that conversation anymore. And it's just data. So I'll do market research. I will show them the candidate that they're asking for and the price tag associated with it. And if that's the problem, if it's a money problem, if it is, again, even timeline, I'll go all the way back into the job boards that we have and even some of the closed networking and recruiting groups that I'm a part of, and ask for specific timelines and days to fill for other things, and use all of that and put it together in a report and say the average time to fill with best case scenario, which they never have, right? They're not best case scenario most of the time, is X days. Like, because it's not you personally, right? It's market, it's whatever their requirements are. Now, 9 times out of 10, our clients will actually come back and say, great, up at 50K, or let go of the location, or get rid of the clearance. Like we can work with something. Once they understand all of the elements at play, they are better able to make a strategic decision around what they are and aren't willing to give up, because they understand that this is not emotion, it's not ego, and we can get somewhere. I'm not telling you no, I'm just saying it doesn't look like that.
It sounds like there's a little bit more homework involved when it comes down to finding that fit and really making sure that you're hiring for what you need versus just quick getting the body in there.
And sometimes they're not interested in any of that and they're only interested in quick getting the body in there. But then let's have that conversation. Perfect. I'll see you again in 3 or 4 months when we have to fill it again.
when we're
for
finding
whatever
somebody else,
reason.
because that's the whole thing, hiring for a fit, not just for a body. So very interesting there. How can you help to ensure that you are hiring somebody that fits both that skill set and that the one that you need and will add positively to the company culture? We've talked about this a little bit before, but I'm still hung up on it, like a test or something. We don't want to force somebody to have to prove themselves, but we still need to know that they can do what they say they can do.
Yes. I mean, I think the technical vetting is far easier because it can be done with a test. It can be done with an interview with a SME in that field, right? So I'm actually far less concerned about the tech vetting of a candidate than I actually am your culture fit or your value add of a candidate. So I think that is a little bit more sticky, a little bit more gray. And I think really how I approach that with our current clients is I ask them to get really clear about what your brand is, what's your culture, what does that mean? Like, what does that really mean? And then we can reverse engineer how to vet that, how to ask about that, how to explore that, how to target certain markets, candidates, what have you. But if we have no idea and it's just, oh, I want a culture fit, but you can't even articulate what your culture is, then how are you going to evaluate that somebody's a value add to that? And I do prefer value add to fitting into a preconceived, you've already built whatever, because we do want someone to add to that, to hopefully bring something different to the table, not just be status quo. And again, if you're in a position, and some of our clients have been, where they're like, our current workforce is fine, but not what I'm looking for going forward. So they're actually also looking for a change, then you really don't want a culture fit to the current, right? You want something different. You're looking for something different, but really truly sitting with them and getting honest about, what does that mean? What do you think that means? And then we can target a specific way more efficient and accurate.
I like the idea of a value add. I don't know that I've considered that previously in the world of recruiting, to say that not just to fit the culture that you have, but to add to it for growth and to bring
Yeah.
in people that have different ideas and different ways of thinking, and those types of added bonuses that are going to add to your team versus just fitting in.
Yeah.
That's giving me
Diversity.
something I have some notes to write, Caitlin. I have some notes to write. And we talked a
Diversity
little
is a
bit.
thing. It's important.
It
Yes.
is very much so. But that takes us to the concept that you mentioned already a little bit, which is the concept of employer branding. What is employer branding? It's different from your marketing branding. So what exactly is employer branding, and how do we utilize it in government contracting?
I was going to say, Meg Kerns, aren't you better apt to answer this than I am? Our marketing director. So employer branding, absolutely, I mean, huge marketing component to it, if you are clear about what your brand is to begin with, right? Because again, if we're just throwing things out there just to throw it out there and that's not a brand. So it's a very basic branding 101. When you think of a specific brand, Nike, whatever, right? Like, what do you think of? It is often a feeling. It is often a consistent feeling, something you can count on being delivered time and time again. Employer branding is no different in my world. So the way that, and GovCon is very dry, so employer branding is even more important in differentiating in highly saturated areas, specific to candidate marketing techniques. So if we're in a highly cleared space, a highly competitive space, when I reached out to a candidate and they instantly Google whatever the name of the client organization is, and there's nothing, or like a horrific Wix website that they've created from 15 years ago, like, it's not a good feeling. It doesn't seem, especially, and most of our clients do cool stuff. So it's like, come on, you got to be able to articulate that, showcase that in a way where a candidate, a potential candidate, can get some kind of feeling of who you are and what you do. And they're usually more apt to take my call than they would be if they can't find you, or they don't know, or it's like, ooh, like these people just, they just made up a company. There's like 4 of them, right? So it matters what that feeling is. But the employer branding is more than just a Google. It is far more kind of embedded throughout the entire recruiting process. How we interact with our candidates, how we treat them, what our communication is, how the interviews are conducted, the efficiency with which that is done, the way that we're evaluating, all of it matters. All of it leaves somebody with a certain type of feeling throughout your process. And one of the things that I espouse most is that we want even the candidates that we turn down or that don't get the job to still feel good about the process. Even at Boost specifically, we have kind of a thanks, no thanks email that we send out at the end of the search, where if somebody has come through, whether it just be a phone call or even just a resume but didn't get it, our communication actually says, please don't let this deter you from following your dreams, and like, don't let this small little blip on the radar mean anything. Like, you got this, keep going, keep up with us, keep looking at our careers page. When something else comes up that you like, reach out. No just means no right now. It doesn't mean no forever. So you always want them to leave with a good feeling, no matter how the outcome came from the search. So employer branding is super important. And even more so as companies grow, especially in GovCon, try to merge, try to acquire, try to compete with bigs, their subs instead of priming. It matters. It matters greatly.
And it sounds like it's very subjective, as marketing tends to be.
Yes.
So it's very subjective there. And then that takes us to who's in charge of creating and promoting the branding and messaging that goes along with that employer branding.
Well, hopefully you're in charge of the
For
content.
Boost, I do take responsibility, as well as our leadership. I will say they do a fantastic job.
Yes, but it's everyone's job, right? Really, truly branding and employer branding ambassadors, if you will. It's everyone's job. Just as technically it's everyone's job to do BD, no matter where you are in an organization, how you interact and how you are with clients, with your colleagues, it all matters. It all permeates. It all, brings business or deters it. It all matters. So again, I think it kind of leads us back full circle to conscious hiring, being strategic about it, aligning with your brand, having a brand, being conscious that employer branding is a thing and leaning into that and using it in your favor, because it all matters. It all affects one another.
And I think that when you're looking to hire new people, when they are able to do something such as Google you or go to your website or hang out on your social pages, if they already have an idea of what the company looks like and how it feels, and then they come to their first interview or their second interview and it matches, I feel like that adds to that branding and their ability to trust and feel comfortable in potentially pursuing a long-term career here or anywhere.
Sure. And I also think it lends to authenticity, right? You thought it was this and then it turned out to be this. That's a good thing, right? Like, that's
what
good.
You see is what you get.
Right. It doesn't feel like bait and switch. Also for Boost, I think does a great job of this because of you. One thing that we do that I love is that we have videos. We have videos like on websites, we have YouTube, we have the podcast, we have so many different venues and avenues for which to express the brand, express the people, that when I talk to our candidates for our own internal stuff, I rarely have to have conversations about who we are and what we do. They come to the table educated with great, they love Stephanie. Everyone loves Stephanie's videos and all of her stuff. And they feel like they can connect with that. They can then see themselves clearly in this space, and they are very committed to the process and are far less likely to ghost us, far less likely to take a competitor's matching offer, because they feel our brand is such that they feel like, oh, this could be home. This is inclusive. This is different. This is clear and well articulated. So it's everything.
So if somebody is looking to jumpstart their employer branding, a couple of things they could potentially do. One, I would recommend starting with internal and deciding how you want your business to look to the outside. And that comes as part of that culture and figuring out how you want to be perceived. And that starts again on the inside with the team that you have right now. The other thing I would recommend is definitely getting onto some of those places that are not controlled by you, i.e. Glassdoor, having your employees fill out those favorable, honest reviews of your company and your CEO and your leadership, and the way that they can fill those out so that when others are Googling, people are going to Glassdoor. They're hanging out over there. So if there are no reviews of your company from an internal perspective, it's hard for people to get a feel of what's real and what's true. So part of building that brand is to have people speak highly of you that have experience internally.
Certainly, right? Kind of, again, the lowest hanging fruit. I feel like it has a negative connotation, but true, right? It's already there. You are already resourced to do that. That is no, large feat, hopefully. And I think this is a little bit more HRy, but you should know what those people are going to say, right? We do not want Glassdoor reviews to be a surprise. So having those harder internal conversations, really being willing to explore, be open to feedback, seek the feedback, seek making changes that you need. It just requires the desire, honestly.
I would agree with that. And I also think that part, especially in government contracting, we're using our website and our social promotions and things of that nature to not only speak to our clients, but potential teaming partners and candidates. So it's pretty much threefold there. So you're going to have information and content sharing. And when I say content, I mean like your blogs, what your website looks like, the types of information you're talking about on your social pages. If you're doing any webinars or digital events, all of those things need to match in what you're saying and sharing it in the way that you also do business. So
Yes.
promoting the employer brand alongside your marketing for clients, alongside the way that you're teaming for other people, all three of those have to work in tandem in order for this to be successful.
Yes.
How can you promote your employer brand to potential hires before starting the recruiting process? So if you know you've got somebody coming, you're trying to hire a BD person, or you're trying to hire somebody for HR down the pike, but you want to start now in getting the word out there about who you are as a company, how do you do that?
I don't know, Meg, how do you do that?
How is the best way that you have seen that when you're trying
Yes.
to do that, when you're talking to different potential candidates, we hear that they see our stuff, but how's the best way to get that out?
That's a great question. I think, again, because everything depends, it depends on what your space is, right? So, for example, if you are like lean into what works for you already, what kind of organization you already are. And again, a lot of our clients do cool stuff. They have good tech, they build tech, really cool tech for the government, a lot of them. So, like, lean into that. If video is good for you, if you come across well in video, if your leadership does, humanize so that we candidates, humans, can connect, can see, can envision themselves in your space, can get a feel for who you are, what you do, and why. Why does it matter? Is there a mission behind it? Lean on that. If you're mission driven, if you are, again, like if you're doing cool NASA projects and like building robots, like do some sort of marketing that targets that. And I think it all does depend on what kind of roles we're talking about. For example, perhaps your accountant doesn't quite care about the robotics, right, of your organization, but they would totally be into, the fact that you guys do a lot of social impact work on the side, or you're big into, perhaps you're, partnering with environmental causes or something. Like, lean into what works for you. Every company has something super cool about them. Otherwise, hopefully you guys wouldn't be there. And what is that? How can we use that? How can we lean into that? How can we talk about it? Using current examples of your own experience is really powerful. I do that a lot. I often talk about how Stephanie, our CEO, gives me, it's the easiest thing ever because she gives us a lot of experiences to talk about. Like, she does remote work extremely well. She does humanizing the process well. She does things like she makes sense. The things that she does make sense. And so when I talk about Boost in our culture, it's very easy. I just go, oh, what happened to me a month ago? This is how I felt. This is a great example of that. So you have all the information already just by being at the company, owning the company, working with the company, whatever it is. What do you like about it? What kept you there? What drew you there to begin with? And then how could you get that out into whatever specific space we're talking about? Because again, it's all strategy. So if we're targeting highly cleared engineers, that would be a very different marketing kind of candidate strategy than would be, an admin assistant, if you will, like a corporate level administrative assistant that's temporary or what have you. So it all depends, but I think employer brand holistically and at a very high level definitely needs to be defined and articulated across the board in all your platforms and all the different ways that are appropriate for each platform, but then also your specific marketing content and strategy to a job matters. And actually a great example of when it would almost be not useless, because that sounds horrible, but there are certain jobs where marketing virtually kind of doesn't matter. Full scope poly is a great example. That's an in-person game all day. We can blast out all the things. They're never reading it. They're in a skiff. They're locked down from like 7 to 4. They text sometimes, maybe. They are often mission driven. They are often project driven. So what they care about is what is the work and how is that different and how can I have a higher impact on the next project? So that needs to be your sell. So your sell needs to shift. Your strategy needs to shift based on all of that information. So again, just getting really clear about what those things are and then moving forward with all of that in mind, because it's not going to be one size fits all.
It's really determined by you and your search as a company.
Yes.
So when we talk about companies who maybe don't have the ability or the time or, the resources to hire an outsourced recruiting agency or even a staffing firm, what are the mistakes that you see most often in the recruiting space when people are trying to DIY a hire? They're trying to do it themselves, boots on the ground, coming at it from just, one person and, their friend who are trying to start building a team. What are the mistakes that they should be able to avoid?
So outside of our typical answer of stop hiring your friends, the next one is that I think you should have a process. Most of the time it feels very reactive and like they're just winging it, right? There's no consistency to what they're doing and how they're doing it. If nothing else, I need you to be consistent. If you're going to open up a position, be very clear about your job description, and hopefully that can easily translate into how this person will be evaluated at their performance management review. If it can't, go back to the drawing table. Then once you've done that and we're clear on the role and what the metrics are for success for that role, then define your process based on that. So if we're going to be interviewing 2 rounds of interviews, who's at those interviews? Why? What questions are they asking? What's the reason for those questions? How are you evaluating answers? It needs to be a consistent, repeatable actual process, not just calling someone on the phone, hey, asking a few random questions, and it's just this one person with this information there's no other person involved. There's no bouncing ideas. There's no other perspective or take. That's all a recipe for failure, that version. But if you can get clear, have a process, a defined process, it is consistent. So there's zero discrimination happening. And then once you get to the end, being confident, again, these are humans. You can't mitigate human risk. People will always disappoint you. And sometimes they will absolutely wow you. So be open to that too. Some people can kill it. And, so just, it's not always a disaster. But, and I think if you need any strategy help, like call us. This is exactly what we do. We help you build from the ground up, branding, process, strategy. It is scalable. It is repeatable. It is unique to where you are in your industry, in your business cycle, in your staffing. And it's what we love. Like this, I love this. This is exciting to me. I love helping any business figure out, hey, this is where I am. This is where I want to be. And great, have you considered, using this as an evaluation technique? Have you considered employing this? And depending on size, because I think it's 50 and over, then in GovCon specifically, like we run into a whole lot of actual compliance that needs to be involved. So like you really should at that point not be trying to DIY any, preferably like way before we get to 50, you're not DIYing it anymore, but there's like legal reasons why we should not be DIYing it.
There are compliance things in the government. That's just yes. a common theme of things. And I'm going to ask you to break my heart really quickly. So if I'm DIYing my recruiting for a new position,
yes,
should I expect to get a person off of LinkedIn that is going to be quality? Is that my first place to go? If I'm blasting out my job role on social media, is that typically where we get really good people, or is it more the internal search that's going to be fruitful?
I think it depends.
No.
It always depends, Meg. So I think, well, post and pray first and foremost is not a strategy, right? Posting a job and just praying for applicants that match, probably not your best bet. Again, most of the time, especially like business development searches, those are one for sure. In fact, often those actively pursuing open roles are not best aligned, suited for that role in business development specifically. And so we are absolutely, it's a hunting game. Now, is LinkedIn the best platform for hunting? It depends. It absolutely depends. It is certainly not for highly cleared. That's not a thing on there. But it certainly could be for accounting with specific backgrounds. It could be for engineering, like software engineering, QA people. It just depends. I like LinkedIn far above all the rest for market insight and contract behavior and history. So I can figure out what companies used to prime, used to sub, had, this version of the role, then that version of the role, how they titled it, what they called it, who the people were with the different qualifications, and really reverse engineer the exact growth pattern of a contract. And then we can use that to predict what it's going to do going forward, or who's going to prime it or sub it, or where the partnerships need to be. Where is it based out of? Can we then figure out the salaries based off of that? So I like LinkedIn more for the research aspect of it versus the hunting, depending on the role, right, and the company that we're hunting for. For Boost internal, it actually does really well for our accounting division specifically. So we are looking for a very specific unicorn in Boost in general, but in accounting even more so, because we're asking for a very corporate back office skill set with a consulting function, an external client consulting facing function. And that's extremely rare. So we actually often have to go the market research route of what other companies even do corporate accounting with consulting built in. What areas of the country is that in? Can we work with that time zone? Where, what are they calling them, so that we can figure out how to run searches on the other job boards and tweak our Booleans. How do they grow that person from there? What did they used to be? They used to be a bookkeeper, then they became a junior accountant, then they became an account manager. Now they're a CFO or controller, like whatever. Like, what is the career path for that? So LinkedIn is great. For all your tech world, it's going to be not LinkedIn at all. Most of the time, like super techie stuff is often GitHub and Stack Overflow and X-ray searches on things. And they have more of their like open source portfolios. Their actual like tech coding portfolios are out there for you to find. And then we have things as simple as like your C-suite searches, which sometimes are great for LinkedIn in terms of their reputation of the person. Like, how many people are they linked at? What are they posting? What are they commenting on? It's because that's definitely more of a businessy reputation for some of the higher end things. But even so, I think that is also very much a networking game, some of your C-suites. So it really depends.
It does. It does. And I'm going to invite, if anybody has questions, I know we have a few more minutes left here and we have a few more things that I want to get Caitlin's thoughts on, but if anybody has questions, they want to throw them in the chat or the Q&A, now would be a great time for that, to make sure that we get to them and have a chance to answer them fully. So we recently, and I say we, meaning you recently worked a search for a very specific role for Boost in terms of technical skills as well as culture fit. Can you walk me through the general process for that?
Yes, it was long. It was probably one of our longest searches to date. It was 49 days. And we landed, I think everyone collectively agrees on like best case scenario in the end. So it was absolutely worth 49 days. But to the participant that asked about like timelines, our first question, timelines, and like how do you talk someone off the ledge with a timeline? I spent a lot of time in that space during this search because 49 days is ridiculous for something that's not on contract. And so it was a very difficult search for a number of reasons, and some of which were new this go around that we had not experienced previously. And we've staffed this role before. This was not a backfill per se, but we staffed the same level, same type of role before without issue. So also, it is 2021, it is no longer 2020. So we often blame things on COVID in 2020. And that was no longer really kind of in play because we had done this before in that space in a much shorter timeline. So it was like, all right, it's not that. So really, we had to figure out this weird new market that we found ourselves in, and this juxtaposition of these, and it was in the accounting division. So these technical skills at a high level, coupled with this client-facing portion of the role, the capacity to be external, also manage internally. So there was a high level of emotional intelligence that was involved, that needed to be in this person, in this role, to be successful. So it was a lot of frog kissing is what we call it, when we're interviewing, and we're not interviewing people that are not technically sound, but there was always like something that wasn't quite a perfect fit for how clear we became through both at the outset and then through this process, what the softer side of things were that needed to be present. And again, back to kind of the emotional quotient of it all, the EQ involved here, and how this person really needed to have some soft skills that were super important. One of which being the internal management of a team, the feeding and caring of a team, the growing of a team. And so all of that doesn't come across on a resume. All of that is conversation. All of that is being curious about how they do X, Y, how they would approach a certain situation, a lot of behavioral questions. And so it took a lot of time, took a long time, took us 49 days. And I mean, we must have done 7, 8, 9 interviews, like full round, like fully through processed interviews. So multiple rounds per candidate before we got to this person who actually did come off of LinkedIn and was not looking for a job. We just hounded her enough till she was like, fine, I'll take your call. But She is again, I think everyone would agree, best case scenario in the end. And it is sometimes an unfair position for a recruiter to be in. It will feel like a no-win position to be in when you know that this person is out there. If these people could just have some patience with you, like I know we're doing everything we can to locate the right fit at the cost of a timeline. So what is more important to you? Settling and taking a little bit of a risk, knowing some red flags that aren't in alignment with what your vision of this role in person is? Or are you willing to keep waiting for the right fit and the longer term solution, a shorter term game or a longer term game, right? And just continuing to have those conversations with your stakeholders, with your hiring manager, with your CEO, with whomever, and being very confident about that. That's the other thing. I knew there was nothing else we could be doing in this search. I was doing it with our recruiters. I was trying to figure out what was happening in the market. Like, this was baffling to me, which also was interesting and intriguing because I love a challenge. But figuring out what it was about, like, why all of a sudden is this hard to find? Is it this level? Is it this management style? Like, what is this? Is it the fact that we do consulting that's a turnoff to this type of technical skill set? How can I fix that? How can I mitigate? How can I sell this differently? And I want to be also careful with sell, because we don't want to set someone up for failure, right? Thinking the role is something and then they get here and it's not. So that's obviously not what I mean. But how can I tweak my language to have a better return rate on my emails or whatever it may be? But this in the end, 49 days, I think to date, our longest search ever. It did end in glory. And
it was
we are
worth the
super
time
excited.
and the effort
It
put in
was.
because it found somebody who fit all of those things. So if you're looking to really fit both the culture and the technical skill set and the potential to grow with your team or grow a team, it's going to take a little bit longer to find that person. So you have
Yes.
to be willing to put the effort in to do it.
Right. And you have to, as the recruiter, have the hard conversation, and hopefully you have leadership that has partnered with you. In our case, we certainly did, that was willing to say, I do not like this timeline, but I'm here for it. I'm not cool with the fact this is taking forever, but I'm going to wait until we find the right fit. And our leadership comes from a place of knowing that the longer term game is often the smarter version of things. And so not that I don't get pushback, I do have the hard conversations around timeline and why and what's happening and all those things. But in the end, that's the win, right? Like the best. So I don't have to. Hopefully next time around when we come up against this, I can lean on this as an example, right? Look, the market is in a weird space for XYZ reason. It took us 49 days to find her. Remember? So have a little grace with me. Like I promise you, I'm not drawing it out for fun. I
And that's
promise that
also
this is, the best case. This is the best thing to do.
that's also a good reminder for when you are speaking to, or if people are taking a search to their teams, to say, hey, this is what we need to do in order to make this viable for us and to find us the best person to fill this role versus just the person to take care of the task list.
Right.
Were there any lessons learned regarding the search in this specific case?
I'm sure there were a yes and no. I think, again, there's not anything I look back on and go like, man, I wish we had or hadn't done that differently. It really was a lot of things that were more outside of our control, like markets. The fact that we're in such a small niche space. And so to find someone at that level in this version of industry is just very rare. So every time we do a search that is extremely challenging, we do now have the data and the market insight tools for the next time around to say, hey, this is what it looked like then. This is what it took us, X number of interviews, X number of iterations. But again, lovingly and thankfully, our leadership, it gets very clear with me up front at the outset of a search. So it's not that a search is shifting throughout the process, which would certainly be a lesson learned. Like, you should have gotten clear about that before we interviewed 5 people and you decided that's not what you were looking for. So it's nothing like that. It's honestly, there was a lot outside of our control. So I hope our lesson learned is kind of more team oriented or holistic at a company culture level, that sometimes it may not be 2 weeks. Sometimes it may be longer. And so perhaps we prep a little bit further out than we would normally. Perhaps we have a little bit more grace with the process, because the end result is absolutely worth it.
And a good way to mitigate that in the onset would be to have your employer branding nailed down, know exactly who and what you're looking for, and then being flexible. I feel like flexibility is something that in government contracting we don't talk enough about, but it's something we do every single day.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Right. So I think flexibility, absolutely being, and our, again, we have great clients. We have internally our own organization, true partnership. So trusting, right, in both directions, trusting that I'm telling you, like, that I'm not dragging it out for fun. I promise you, here, come look, let me show you all the data. Let me walk you through X, Y, Z, right? Being super transparent and open as a recruiter with them so that they feel that way with you, that there is flexibility pretty easily.
Definitely. And then since we now found our unicorn person, for those of you who keep hearing us reference unicorn, it's that person who fits all of the things. And we know that they're out there. It's just trying to find them is the real worry or the real hard work there. So now that we've found this person, what is the best way for companies to prepare to retain that top talent? I do hear that the secret sauce there is in the onboarding process.
Sure, which should be an extension of feeling with which we have left this candidate. So the feeling with which they have come through the process, we don't want it to end and just for all of us to fall off the earth at the offer, right? Which often happens. There's a very clean line between recruiting and HR, and it's at the offer. So once the offer has gone out and I've set a start date, normally recruiting backs it up and HR starts to come in or corporate starts to come in. So I think having a open dialogue, constantly communicating with the two departments. We do that here at Boost. I work hand in hand with the ops team. I work hand in hand with HR. Here's the start date. We need to ship a laptop here. We need to do this. Our leadership, again, excellent about scheduling out the first couple of weeks for this person so that when they come in, it feels like somebody put some time and effort and wanted them to be here. It was purposeful. Things aren't just thrown together and no one knows what's happening. Like, nobody likes that, right? Everyone wants to feel like, oh, I have purpose. I'm important. I was accounted for. They scheduled this. There was intention here, like, and which is all an extension of your brand. So I think you have a great opportunity to showcase brand right there. And so don't mess it up. Like, go for it. Lean in. Welcome this person. Bring them into the fold. Really, you know, ask them to drink the Kool-Aid. Like, let's go. Like, come on. Like, we want you. We're here for you. Make yourself available. Don't leave them on their own for too long, especially in a virtual environment like Boost and most of the others with COVID. I know a lot of are going back to in person, but a lot of it's virtual. I know from my own onboarding experience that my favorite thing that I say is that I was never left alone for too long to like question anything or go down a dark hole or a dark path or anything. So it's that you know, I felt like it was purposeful and there was intention and I was part of a team, truly a team that was welcoming and cohesive and had it together.
Exactly. I was going to bring that up and you did it for me. So just to say that making sure that they are consistently, there are touch points there that say just check-ins or daily task reminders or whatever it might be that gets them to feel like they're making a difference and also that they're part of the team.
Yes.
And doing that consistently until they do, either if they're in a consulting space taking on clients, or if they do have their own accounts, or if they do have a specific set of tasks that are now fully run by them, that takes a little while to get going. And so you don't want people questioning their decision in the first couple of weeks when you're getting them ready
Yeah.
to stay here long term.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely.
So a couple of things to kind of reiterate and wrap up here. We're going to give people a couple minutes back in their day, but we talked a little bit about getting ready to prepare for that hire. We're talking about hiring for the fit, the culture, and the skill set. It's really diving into what your company needs, where your company is going, and how this person is going to fit in to both fill the need for skill set and job, as well as to build out your team. So doing that in the onset is going to prepare you better to have a successful search. And if you're unable to do that on your own, reaching out to somebody who does that regularly or who can help to train your team, as far as if you have your own recruiters internally, but they're feeling a little lost or you're not having as much success as you would like them to have, maybe bringing somebody in who can train them in the better ways to search specifically for this type of person in this type of market. I think
Yes,
might
I
be helpful there.
love the recruiter training and also even your hiring manager training, which usually goes hand in hand. So when we come in and help clients really kind of teach and evolve their current recruiters, we often find that it blends into a little bit of hiring manager training too, because typically those are the ones conducting the interviews. Those are the ones interacting with your recruiters. So educating all is definitely helpful.
And then to follow that up would be your employer branding. We talked a lot about employer branding today, and the best way for you to get a hold of that is to look at it constantly. Keep taking a look at what it seems, what the perception is of your team, because as leadership, we often have an idea of what we want things to look like and the way we're saying things, but perception is often reality. So knowing what your team thinks, how they feel, and what they would say should they be approached by somebody is going to help you get a really good idea of your employer branding and how that is perceived by other people, especially as you're trying to hire for new companies. And then finally, that last piece that we just talked over would be retaining that top talent by including your HR departments, as well as your recruiters, as well as your leadership, to make sure that people are feeling valued, that they're feeling like they're making a difference, and that they're really having an impact on what happens in the company and they want to stay. Did I miss anything there? Anything else that you would say is a must do going forward from here? And those who are on the line with us today?
I would say call Boost. I would love to partner with you. That's the solution.
That is the solution.
Call
That is the
me.
solution there. So I'm going to put up our last slide here. So if you have any other questions that we did not get to today, Caitlin and I are readily available on LinkedIn should you like to connect with us. As mentioned earlier in the event today, we do have a podcast where Caitlin has graciously joined me previously to talk a little bit about recruiting post-COVID and what that means for companies going forward. So, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me yet again today. And thank you everybody else for spending time with us and doing a little bit of education here surrounding this space and how you can be better prepared to hire those new unicorns. Have a fantastic day.